Building your business with the end in mind. Most founders are so focused on the daily grind that they're often not thinking about or preparing for the ultimate goal, which could be to sell the company. Today, the do's and don'ts for growing your business through the eyes of an entrepreneur who has built and sold more than 20 businesses and now specializes in guiding others. Expert Connections starts now. From tech to wellness, cleaning to exotic cars, our guest today has built and sold a range of businesses, a variety of industries, as you just heard, over the last 2 decades. Welcome to Expert Connections. I'm Julie Holton. Our Startup Connections expert today, Christine McDannell, founder of the Magnolia Firm, an internationally digitally focused M&A and business brokerage firm. Christine, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Julie. Quite the intro. Thank you.
I'm so excited to dive in because there are so many directions we could take this conversation. Before we talk about your work now, I want to really paint the picture for our audience with your experience and the businesses that you have built and exited. I know that you can relate several times over to the fact that many in our audience are in the more early stages of growing a startup. So why don't you start by telling us about one of your first ventures?
So the first one was Cleanology. It was called Christine's Cleaning Service first before I understood branding. I was 23 years old. I was in real estate though. So my real estate license, prior 5 years of property management experience, started really young in the business corporate world. But yeah, I knew I was born to be an entrepreneur and work for myself and create my own destiny. So started that company with $300. I cleaned condos in downtown San Diego for 1.5 years, every single day, bartended at night, paid my bills. It was like a wild time, but when you're 23, you have all the energy in the world. And I just knew I was going to grow, big company, have employees. It was kind of a means to an end. As I'm scrubbing a toilet, I'm not like, oh, this sucks. I'm actually like, okay, this is just going to get me to that next level. And I'm going to have a team and I'm not going to have to clean in the future. I actually enjoyed it in hindsight. It's funny because it was very mindless. So now when I'm in tech or when I'm in, I'm doing strategy, negotiations, and your brain, I get so exhausted. But with cleaning, it was like, oh, it was just more mindless. So I feel like I get, more tired doing other things. But yeah, it was just a fun ride. And so I sold that within like 5 or 6 years, I think, and exited for 6 figures. And I was still in my 20s. So that was we were 37 employees at the end of the day. And and so we were our largest privately owned in San Diego.
Okay, so to pause for just a moment, I have to also say there are some days when I'm like, oh gosh, I wish I was cleaning my house instead of doing whatever financials or doing whatever proposals I'm doing. Not to downplay the hard work that is, but sometimes you just gotta, switch it out and do the lesser of the tasks. You took this cleaning company and grew it to huge numbers. What are some key lessons you learned in those early days?
I mean, I know there's this anti-hustle culture right now. And if you want a lifestyle business and want to grow very slowly and have a life, okay, great. I'm not gonna that's totally one direction, but it is hustle, like straight hustle, crazy hours. It's not easy. I know Instagram's making it look easy, not the case. I think my other mistake, and again, I was young. So you want to learn mistakes early. I remember my P&L, and I had an amazing bookkeeper. And so I was so all I cared about was hitting $1 million in revenue back then. Like that was that magical number. And in the cleaning industry, that's hard to do. That's all I freaking cared about. The problem was at the end of the day, I realized I'm like, whoa, we're bringing in like 400K, but there was no profit. So I was too busy thinking about the wrong number. Like profit is first. Profit is so important. In the beginning, obviously, you're not going to have it because you're scaling and growing, but there's going to be a point, and this is important for the exit because that's the number your exit is based on. So it's just like cutting expenses. I mean, we went through the recession of 2008. And so it's weird. I felt it coming on. And so 6 months prior, I took my P&L and just anything that was not really needed, $1,000 a month on cell phones for my team. But I'm like, but they have their own cell phones. So what if I like offer to pay a portion of their bills and let's get rid of this $1,000 and take it to 200. So we did that. And so, I think that that's important, is just focusing on the profit over the top line. Because I see it all the time in any industry. So those were some like quick lessons. In culture, I think, and taking care of your customers. So a killer reputation is number one in any business. If you can like nail that, you're set. Secondary would be, having an amazing culture with an amazing team. Put your team first over customers. I know that that's another, contrarian thought or approach. But I mean, if your employees are happy, your clients will be happy in turn. You just got to have their back. And the customer is not always right. I'm sorry, they're not. Yeah.
No, especially if they're not the right fit. We talk about that on the show sometimes, finding the right fit. And if the customer isn't right, then maybe they're not even the right fit for you. It sounds, Christine, like when, the first business, you maybe weren't starting out building with the end in mind. You have those big picture goals, but I would imagine that after that first exit, as you started building the next company, were you building at that point with the end in mind?
Ooh, that's funny. So I never do. It's so funny. I never know. I never have a dollar amount to hit or exit at. And I never have a timeline. It just happened to be like 5 years usually is the average, because at that point I can have systems in place and marketing. It's like a well-oiled machine, and team and managers. And like the only hat I'll wear forever is the marketing hat. So usually that's the last hat. And then they don't really need me. And then I get bored and just, yeah. So that's at the point where I'm like, oh, it's time to exit. So that's always been the case. Now with my tech company, which I had from 2018, 2021, I focused too much on the exit because and I knew not to do that. I knew better, but I still did it because in the tech world, that's all people are talking about, care about. And so I kind of got wrapped up in that, and it was a distraction. So I'm like, just hit revenue first. Like, don't, that's important. And concentrate on build for everybody listening, especially starting out. You're going to spend the first 2 to 3 years, like, again, building the infrastructure. Just build an incredible company. That's all you need to focus on. Okay. Building amazing systems, building an amazing culture, team reputation, getting profitable. And then you start like working towards like, okay, let's make sure our books are super clean. If we were to exit, is our books clean? What's that journey going to look like? Do we need to turn on more marketing? As the owner, business is always wrapped around you in the beginning, always. Like that's a given. So let's start stripping some of this stuff off, because otherwise I'm going to have to stay on with the earnout, because like, how's this new owner, going to take my spot if I'm working crazy hours? So I would say those are the main things.
You've said that all except 2 of the businesses that you've launched since 2003 are still in business today. What do you believe has been the key to the sustainability?
Oh, great question, Julie. So I think finding amazing buyers. So that's, and both my buyers were first-time business buyers, and so they, I think that's super. And that's something we're proud about at the Magnolia firm. Yeah, we can get, higher multiples for our clients and amazing offers, but we get them incredible buyers. I mean, they become friends with the buyers. They set them up for success. They're willing to help at any moment. So that, for sure, that's why my businesses are still, and again, it was a solid team and foundation. And I tell that buyer, Mr. Buyer, Mrs. Buyer, please do not come in here and change a lot. Of course, it's your business, but if don't fix what's not broken. They always change the website for some reason, even though we have a beautiful website. I don't know why they do that every single time. It's kind of funny. Other than that, they kept my team. They keep everything rocking and rolling. And I think that's why it's really fun. And it happens a lot. I'll overhear, somebody here in San Diego mention Cleanology or mention Eco Chateau. And I'm like, oh my God, I started that company in 2003. And they're like, what? So that I get a lot of joy out of that. Just creation of stuff that didn't exist yet.
Let's talk about your work now at the Magnolia firm and your Grand Slam system that you have for buying, selling, and acquiring companies. First of all, what made you decide to launch this business?
So I did all my exits, even the larger software one, I did myself, except the Cleanology, because I didn't know how to sell business. So that one, I had a decent broker, but there were some things I'm not thrilled about on that process. So I'm like, well, I'm just going to do my own here on out. And I did. And then a couple of girlfriends of mine were exiting 2021 and they were like, hey, Christine, can you come on as a consultant help? And I really enjoyed it. I was making great money. They got amazing exit prices and they just were like, you got to do this for real. And so I was like, oh, I was going to have an M&A business brokerage firm, but like retirement plan down the road. And so I was like, wow, I want to do this now. And I mean, had a waiting list out the gate. It was crazy. It was fun. I loved it, but it was pretty crazy. And then I brought a business partner in. So I'm 2 years in almost. And I brought my business partner in a year in because it was just like, so there's so much room for innovation in this space. And we need that. And so that's wide open, and that's the thing when I see this like gap in a marketplace, I have to like fill it. And so I was like, oh my gosh, it's just such a bad industry and there's so much missing. It's driving me nuts. So let's take that spot of number one and just grow as fast as we can. So that's what we're doing. And it's got an amazing team. So I can't take the credit. And yeah, that's how I started.
I can feel your energy, not to downplay the work that it takes and the expertise and all of that stuff, but I can feel your energy. And so it must be just fun to have this front row seat to see some of these incredible businesses, how far they've grown and where they're going to go next, and to be helping the sellers through this process. Your website mentions wanting to bring humanity back into the selling process. What does that mean to you?
So we do some fun stuff. So we actually have them kind of like manifest that perfect buyer. So I want them to write it out and I want them to give it to us in the beginning, because then we can write our marketing and our team knows like how to attract that perfect buyer, because we have like, who is their perfect buyer, and spend time doing that. And then like a mantra that they come up with that's like, I sold my business for $3.5 million, by this date, like being extremely specific. And again, this is at the exit. This is when they're listed. I sold it by this date. I found these amazing buyers and it was a husband and wife team, or like the more specific they can get, the better. Kind of like your customer avatar. Like, again, these are unique things where I'm like, okay, you make a customer avatar. Why wouldn't you do that when you exit? Okay, you make a pitch deck when you raise capital. Why wouldn't you do that when you exit? Because people are visual. So those are the unique things we do to attract that perfect buyer and that's bringing humanity into it. In the data room, I do seller interviews where I'm interviewing the seller, all the questions a buyer is wondering. So then they see that interview. They don't necessarily need to tie up my seller's time and with the same questions over and over and over. So those are the things. And the whole team has the same ethos. Like, we're very honest. I want to know the elephants in the room, the skeletons in the closet up front, because most businesses are going to have one. So I'm like, okay, seller, like, I need to know it and we need to tell it to everybody up front. Because like, I don't want it to be hidden. I don't want it to come up later in due diligence. So yeah, those are some things.
Aside from perhaps like those skeletons that sellers might not want to bring up to the forefront, what are some of the biggest mistakes that you see entrepreneurs making?
I'll tell you one that's not a mistake that everybody thinks is a mistake, and it's word for word every single time. They get embarrassed that they don't know their numbers. And again, in a chaos, but they have a bookkeeper and everything. And they're growing, and they're selling, and they're managing their people. And so they're embarrassed, and myself included. Like, if you ask, yeah, like this number, that number, balance sheet, a lot of them, and it took me years to read a balance sheet on my own company. So, I asked my bookkeeper a million times to explain it to me like I was a 10-year-old. So these sellers, that's, again, not a mistake. I mean, great. If you know your numbers inside out, amazing. It is super rare. I mean, an entrepreneur that does, super rare. And they always feel bad. A mistake, again, wrapping the business around, like not unraveling, like being a micromanager and not stripping yourself out of your company is a mistake. If you're micromanaging the entire time, that's not going to work long term. Some other mistakes, I think those are the top. Again, the first one's not a mistake, but they think it is.
I'm glad you mentioned the finances. I mean, that comes up time and time again. And it's like, you have to remind people, well, you probably didn't go into this business and whatever industry you're in for the finances. I mean, like, maybe you want the outcomes, but you don't have to be a numbers person. just enough to know your business and know how to grow and know how it's, how it's functioning appropriately. We actually also have a financial connections segment, and we have an event coming up, just a quick plug for that, financial literacy for founders, all the basics you need to know, from Ruben Levinson of Washington Avenue Advisors. So look for a link. I'll link that down below in the show notes. Okay, Christine, during negotiations, what are some common mistakes you see, and how do you and your team ensure that your sellers are getting fair value?
Yeah, so I think that a lot of M&A advisors and brokers, what they're doing is they're just using like, it's a 3x EBITDA multiple. Like it's an art and a science. There is first off, I always say a business is worth what someone's going to pay for it. Like you can't argue that. That's what it's worth. But it's like us building the value on top of that foundation of that. I mean, of course, it's, the cash flow out of the business. It's going to be that foundation, but how do we bump that multiple higher? We do it by how many years in business, how, longevity of the team, and are they going to stay around, systems and processes, reputation. Our listings are A++ listings. We are so picky. We turn away like 95%. We're boutique. And that's why they sell so easily and quickly for us. Because they already have I do more due diligence on our clients than a buyer does. It's crazy. I'm up on the Facebook comments and reviews. I'm in their Instagram comments. I'm like all over the place. BBB, like Yelp. So I think that's how we do that.
Okay, last question then. Tell us your perfect client. Who are you looking for when you're starting a new relationship?
Yeah, so we deal with digital-based businesses, strictly remote-based. It's recurring revenue a lot of times, which is a magical word for people. They love hearing remote-based, recurring revenue. So that's huge. So that's what we deal with. So these are digital marketing agencies, PR firms, graphic design firms, CRM integrators, and SaaS, IT firm even. So those are the ones, that are selling really well. People got a taste of COVID, freedom during COVID. So they're just like, I'm out of here. Like, I want to start my own business. Majority are first-time buyers, which I'm passionate about also. I love that. So yeah, those, that's an ideal client. At least cash flowing, at least 100K bare minimum. And again, it's women mostly. It's so unfortunate. And I just spoke with 2 last week where they're like, I don't think my business is sellable. I don't think, anybody's going to want to buy it. I might just shut it down. And I look at it and I'm like, you've got cash flow, 20 years of business. Actually, a friend of mine, she 20 years in business, was going to close it down. We were at brunch talking. And I was like, I could get you 300K for this. And we did within a couple months cash. And so she was literally about to shut it down. Another one was about to give it to her employee a month ago, and for free. And we got her 230 cash. So I'm like, so everybody watching, listening, again, if it's cash flowing, it's worth a conversation. You've built something, there's assets there. So that's, perfect customers for us. I mean, we're up market now selling multi-million-dollar deals, but just in my, I took these little ones recently because I speak with the women and I just want to help, because a lot of people aren't going to take a small deal. But especially if I'm that 230 one we sold in 2 weeks. So I'm like, well, if I know I could sell it quickly, let's do it. Don't. But it's unfortunate that women have this lack of self-worth on what they built. They just don't see it like men do. It's really interesting.
Christine, thank you so much for being on the show and sharing your insights. I will include your contact information in the show notes for anyone who fits the mold, wants to reach out to you. Christine, again, thanks for being on Expert Connections.
Yes, thanks again, Julie. Loved being on.
That is all for this episode of Expert Connections. Check out more interviews in our Startup Connections segment and be sure to hit subscribe. I'm Julie Holton. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next week.